Hello, and welcome to Presenting, a podcast where we chat about various topics related to role playing games, typically Paizo products such as Pathfinder and Starfinder, but also others. I'm John Godek. With me today are Mark Seifter and Stephen Glicker from Roll for Combat. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for
Hi.
having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for accommodating my schedule as well. I was really looking forward to the last time we scheduled, and then you guys had to talk to some Eric Mona guy. I figured he's probably a little bit more important than me. So that was okay. That was okay. But thanks for getting me back on your schedule. I really appreciate that. So Mark Seifter is Director of Game Design for Roll for Combat and former Paizo Design Manager, where he helped create both the Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Starfinder. Stephen Glicker is owner of Roll for Combat, where he also GMs and plays. In addition to Roll for Combat, Stephen is the founder and president of Skyscraper Studios, an award-winning digital studio providing comprehensive services for the development, design, and administration of all things digital. Their clients have included the Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated, Discover Magazine, Disney, Scholastic, Girl Scouts of America, Bristol Myers Squibb, Bayer, Gene Tech, Genetech. Which one was it?
Genetech.
Genetech, and many more. We had a discussion on what that was, and I forgot because I didn't write the phonetics in here. You can find Mark on Twitter at Mark Seifter, and Steven is at Roll for Combat, and you can buy their products at battlezoo.com. So Mark and Steven, could you each talk a little bit about how you got started in tabletop RPGs and kind of how that led to Roll for Combat? And let's start with Mark, if that's okay.
Sure. So, I guess is the question how I got started playing tabletop RPGs or how I got started
In the
in the
business.
business?
In the business, yeah.
Okay. So I was pursuing my PhD at MIT on artificial intelligence, and um, one of the designers at Paizo, Sean K. Reynolds, sort of left Paizo, and a job opening opened up. So I applied for it, and I got the position and became a designer at Paizo. And that's sort of the main way that I got into the industry. I'd done a little bit of freelancing for third party products. Before that, not a huge amount. I'd done a lot of playing and GMing, but not like professional designing and writing in the industry. And so then I worked for Paizo for uh, just under 9 years, and starting from around the middle of Pathfinder First Edition with just a tiny thing in Monster Codex that technically got me credit in Monster Codex, but really starting with Pathfinder Unchained and moving forward. Then worked on Starfinder, Pathfinder Second Edition, and really did some author or design lead work on just about every product for Pathfinder Second Edition except for a few of the adventure paths until
Mm-hmm.
I eventually left to become the director of game design at Roll for Combat with Steven. And that's where I am now. I'm working on all sorts of cool products that are the kinds of things that Paizo couldn't necessarily put out because they're very specific, but that are perfect for
Right.
another company like Roll for Combat to put out.
And that was about a year ago that you made the move, or was that
Yeah,
longer
it
than
was
that?
a year and like a few weeks, so almost
Mm-hmm.
exactly a year ago.
And excuse me. So I had actually interviewed you a couple years ago, and so anybody who wants a more detailed background on Mark can kind of look up the individual interview with him. So Stephen, I looked at your bio, your gaming bio you have on Roll for Combat, and one of the things I'll say is that you and I are really close at age because a
Yes.
lot of those same things that you point out there were my experiences. But if you could go ahead and talk about how you got started with role playing games and kind of how that led to Roll for Combat.
Yeah, my experience is a little different. So I started out actually in video games. That sort of was my
Mhm.
first love. And for let's say probably the last 20-ish years or so, I was mostly in the video game forum. I was doing games for people like Disney Online, and I did Harry Potter games and games for Scholastic, and believe it or not, games for like Illustrated. And believe it or not, pharmaceutical companies, we do what's called gamification,
Mhm.
teaching techniques and use game theory. I was doing a lot of that, and I still do it, but not to that big of an extent. And so I was mostly in the video game realm. And then that was back before video games got huge. And then video games kind of got huge and it got really diluted. And for whatever reason, I had kids and moved, and I just sort of fell out of it a little. I was mostly playing the games and not really working. And a lot of my people I was working with um, left their companies, working a lot with Blizzard, and Blizzard at the time
Mm,
when
mhm.
World of Warcraft came out, they were really small and it was a very tiny team and you knew everyone there. And I would go and just hang out with them. And then I would go, I can't remember the last time I went there. And then it was just like, I didn't know anyone. It's a huge
Wow.
company now. So, the whole industry just changed. And then, for whatever reason, I did a video game podcast. So I switched for years and years and years and years. I've been playing a weekly Pathfinder game. Before that, it was 3.5. And I always said to them, I'm like, we should record this and put it like as a podcast. And they didn't really want to do it. They're like, nah, I don't really want to. All right, come on, like, why not? And they were very hesitant because I don't know, they thought they'd become famous or they didn't want to get bothered. I'm like, dude, you're not that
No,
popular.
yeah,
No one's ever gonna bother you. But
yeah,
whatever. And then Glass Cannon came out,
yeah,
and I was so angry. I was like, "You guys, we're doing it now."
right,
I'm like, "We're doing it. If you don't want to do it, then leave the game because we missed our opportunity. But now we're second in the boat instead of first because I was talking about it for years before that, and I wanted to
mhm,
do it with um at first I wanted to do it with Carrying Crown, and then I wanted
mhm.
to do it with what's the one that takes place not Alkins. No, it's the science fiction one. I forgot the name of it.
Numeria, so Iron
Yeah.
Gods.
Mm,
Yes, Iron Gods. Iron Gods. So we what I did with Iron Gods, God, I loved Iron Gods. I liked actually both. And then we were finishing up Iron Gods, and then Starfinder came out, and I said, "This is perfect. We'll do a Starfinder. We'll teach people how to play. It's a new system." At that point, where we're kind of getting bored with Pathfinder First Edition because we're playing it to death, and we've seen it all, and we were really just kind of done with it. So we're very excited, and we started the podcast, and the podcast was pretty popular back then. There was only like one or two podcasts.
right,
I called it Roll for Combat, and I was just going to Paizo cons and Gen Cons and hanging out with everyone. And next thing you know, is talking to Eric Mona and just getting friendly with everyone at Paizo. And I got friendly with Owen Casey Stevens and got friendly with the guys in No Direction. And just sort of like branched out. And then Pathfinder Second Edition was announced. And then I'm like, all right, we got to do podcast for that. We've
mhm,
wrapped up Starfinder, Dead Sons, and right in time to go right into Pathfinder Second Edition. And then I got this idea because every convention I would go to, people would ask, when are they going to do the RPG Superstar contest?
right,
And I
right,
was at PAX Unplugged in 2019, and Eric Mona was there, and I said, "Hey man, are you doing anything with that license?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "You mind if maybe we do something with it?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's work it out." And we worked it out, and I was able to take it over, and he and I worked out what it should be, and then we built this thing where you make monsters. And strangely, it was because of the pandemic, it all came to be because what happened is I finished up the book and finished up the first Battles of Bestiary in the
mm.
2000,
I
and
have that
then
on my shelf. I'm gonna pull it out.
oh really? And then what ended up happening was I was just gonna make it and then like bring it to Gen Con and sell it. Like that's pretty much what I was gonna, and it was gonna
Yeah,
probably
but
end there.
love the hardcover.
Yeah. Yeah. And because of the pandemic, they're like, "Oh, we're not going to Gen Con. There's no Gen Con." It's like,
Mm,
now what? I already made the book. Now what am I going to do? And then all my friends from Blizzard, they're like, do a Kickstarter. Do a Kickstarter." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did a Kickstarter, and it was pretty popular. And it did like $301,000, and everyone seemed to like it. And Mark and I were talking at that time about the Monster Parts system.
mhm,
And then, of course, I went crazy. And then Mark did his Dragon book, and
yeah,
it is Jewel of the Indigo Isles, and then it was very popular, and then it was a lot of fun, and I was having a lot of fun, and at the time I was also working pharmaceutical companies, and it was a lot of work, and I was doing hour days and very busy, and I was having a lot more fun with this than the pharmaceutical
Hmm.
stuff. And I said, let's see if I can move on to this because I don't know how much longer I keep working in that space. I still work in the space, and it's just kind of grown from there. And then it's like right place, right time. And now, especially now after the whole OGL fiasco, and that's another right place, right time. And
Right.
now suddenly, everyone, I wouldn't say everyone, but there's really only secondary publishers, third party publishers for Pathfinder. We're probably the biggest one. And now suddenly everyone's switching, and it's a good place to be. And now we're very popular and everyone wants to know. And suddenly we have to come out with more products. So I guess it's just, again, right place, right time. It's
Hmm.
just weird. It's a series of unlikely events that caused all this. Like chance meeting with Eric to get RPG Superstar, chance meeting of COVID canceling Gen Con that made me do a Kickstarter, and
Hmm.
and so forth and so forth. And it just a lot of chance meetings that seem.
So, kind of, what's your vision now for Roll for Combat? It seems like you've gone from this actual play podcast thing to now you're a publishing house that's pretty big, and you kind of talked about the space there. Cobalt Press had been pretty big, but they kind of made the move over to 5e, and now I kind of wonder, well, they're doing their Black Flag thing, and they're on board with Orc, but still it seems like you've become a pretty big player in the space. Kind of what's your vision going forward with it?
So Mark and I actually talked very carefully about the products we put out because we're not that big. Like Mark is the only other full time employee besides me.
Yeah.
We have a huge number of freelancers and artists, programmers, volunteers, helps. I kind of run my skyscraper company like that too. In fact, skyscraper I'm
Hmm.
employee. Everyone else is like time freelancer full time. Well, basically full time contracts or freelance.
I mean, I
Um,
suppose
so
that's true here too. I'm still full-time contract.
yeah, full time contract, but I won't get into the reasons. I won't get into the reasons, but it's just how you set up your companies. I used to have
Yeah.
very, very large company, blah, blah, blah. I
Hmm.
was I was just like 3 blocks away from 9/11. After that, I changed my entire philosophy of how I run my companies. Now I do it, and
Hmm.
it's been working very well. I've been doing it for 23 years, no problems. The way I do it. Um, we are very careful because we can't put out a lot of products, and we want to make sure we put out products that people are interested in, people can do something with. It has to work for both Pathfinder and 5e because everything
Right.
both. And really the battles we bestiary was because, believe it or not, Eric Mona, the one who told me, is like, look, everyone wants monsters, everyone needs monsters. It's a safe thing to do. And if you're going to come out with something, do that. And a lot of people have said things like, "Oh, don't do a lore book." Well, we did a lore book, and it's done fine, but it doesn't do
Hmm.
nearly as well as our other books. Like, it's like the things that people say to do, we're doing. It's like do a
Hmm.
dragon book. That was Mark's idea, but the dragon book is like doing ridiculous. Like
Right.
everyone loves dragons. Everyone wants to play a dragon. Everyone wants to know lore about dragons. Everyone likes Art of Dragons, and so it's like a 136-page book about dragons and being a dragon and playing it, and it seems to do very well. Um, I did do an adventure path, which is 99.9% done. We're just missing two
Is
art
it
and then
one map? Is that what it
yeah.
is?
Now the map's actually more or less done. It's two pieces of art.
Oh
Uh,
no.
well, I realized at the end, I don't have a piece of art, so I added a new piece to commission of showing them celebrating
Hmm.
again. So send off. And then I realized we are missing like, oh, need a main bad guy art, so I had to get that one done. So I had opportunity to work with Patrick Rennie and Linda Zayas Palmer and Ron Lundeen, like three of the top
Right.
designers of adventures. And I run adventure paths. That's actually all I run. I've run about a third of them at this point, probably closer to like a fifth because so many have come out. I've run a lot of venture paths. So I use, a lot of skills that I learned to build like what I consider an adventure path, and it kind of killed me. So I don't think I'm doing that again. But it's almost out, and at least I've said I did it once. So enjoy the adventure path and play it. Your heart's content. But it did help us build out the world of Valakar. and build out. Like our world is a little different than others. It's kind of a little more
Mhm.
fun and goofy. I say it's very similar to a Guardians of the Galaxy
Oh, fun.
type world. It's like, it's very fun. It is serious, but also a little goofy, and you can find anything there. And what I do like about Guardians of the Galaxy is that humans are just like they're just not the most common ancestors. Like
Mhm.
there's Quill, but that's about it. Like everyone else is just like all over the place. There's like
Right, right.
some human. Ours is the same way. In fact, there's not a single human or elf or dwarf or gnome or any of the common ancestries in any of our products. Like we
Mm.
solve our own because those are covered to death. We try to make things funky. But now
So
we have
so
a
you
new battles. Sorry, what are you gonna say?
I was gonna say, you mentioned, Guardians of the Galaxy, and one of the
Mhm.
things I wonder is, are you gonna be doing any Starfinder related things?
No.
No? Oh, I love Starfinder.
I
I
love
don't know how come
Starfinder
yet.
too, but it doesn't sell as much. However,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
caveat that with we okay, so one of the main reasons I hired Mark is because the the things we do are very complex systems, like the monster part system,
right.
which required someone to understand the mechanics behind the game.
Mhm,
We're now doing Battle Zoo Eldamon, which is actually the thing I've been working on for years. And Mark and I have been talking about it for a long time. That should, in theory, be system agnostic and work
mhm,
pretty much on anything. You should be able to make it work with Starfinder or Pathfinder First Edition. You'll have to do some work on it and some conversion, but it's going to be designed in such a way that it should work with any system, more or less. With some, I don't think it'll be very hard to get it to work with Star. So, maybe if I really get crazy, I can come out with the Starfinder conversion,
mhm.
so that it will work that way.
You'd
Actually, no,
still have to redo the elements and the classes,
yeah,
which is a pretty decent amount of work, but the Eldamon themselves would not be that
correct.
much work once that was done. Like once you were like, okay, I've done the class, I've made some classes for Starfinder, and I have fire. Then you could make almost an arbitrary number of fire Eldamon converted from PF2 to Starfinder quickly, but it would not be
Mhm.
quick at all to make the class and the elements.
Yeah,
Right,
So
right.
that's
and I'm
sort of how
worried.
it works.
Sorry if I'm giving you the long form answers. So
No, no,
it's
that's fine. That's
yeah, I'm
it's
not giving the
very
short form. These are the long form answers. I have the short ones that I do, but I'll give you the people might be interested.
yeah, yeah, no, it's good.
Basically, we're interested in system. Like I have behind me a lot of books, and you know
Mhm,
what? I'm not knocking anyone else's products. A lot of these products are the same as everyone else's products, and that's fine. And you know what? I even saw someone like we were advertising our Battles of Bestiary, and someone's like, I have as many monsters as I need. I don't need another one." And I
mm,
totally get that. I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? You're right." So how is ours different? Well, one, we try to make the monsters very unique, and two, they're all RPG Superstar winners. So they're
right,
not written by us. They're
right.
written by the fans. And if you're interested in 5e, I won't get into the whole design aspect, but the way 5e monsters are designed is not the same way traditionally that Pathfinder monsters are designed. We designed our 5e monsters Pathfinder methodology, and
Mm,
anyone who's used it in 5e is like, "Oh my god, these monsters are amazing." I'm like, there's reasons. Like you know
right.
why. There's hey, they do more than two things. It's like wow, they have full stat blocks and can do like 20 amazing things, and they actually live and have interesting battles, and like that's because we give them space to breathe. So that's something we do. But so we're trying to come up with like new systems, whether it's a dragon book or monster part system, or now Eldamon, which will allow you to capture Eldamon and use them in your games. And you can either just have them as a collection item that anyone can do, very quick and easy, and you can just have fun collecting them, and then you can battle each other with them. And it's basically poker. It's called Eldamon, and it's very similar. Um, Anyone could do it. You don't have to be an Eldamon trainer. But then we have two brand new classes, and one's the Eldamon trainer, where you could actually, befriend the Eldamon, train them, and then evolve them, and then they can do battle for you. And
Mhm,
that's going to be a very complex class because you have 13 different elements and hundreds of different Eldamon. So you can only imagine just how many things you can do. And it's like a spellcaster who can cast every spell. It's
Mhm.
not just a spellcaster. It's a spellcaster who has 13 schools of magic now instead of 4. And then there's even the elemental avatar, which is basically like airbending, which
Mhm.
it's like Avatar. So, these are classes that are so complex and so unique that I don't think a lot of other people have the ability to develop them in the manner that we are. I think anyone can develop them, but Mark has the pedigree to develop these that
Mhm.
very, very few people have. It's help write the rules. He knows exactly where everything has to fall so that balance
Right.
procedure of how to test. Like we're going to be doing the play testing for the class very shortly, so he knows how to do a play test and get the information class. There's all these little things that goes into actually making. A lot of people put out these books. They'll literally just write it and put it out, and that's
Right.
it. But we're doing it a much more nuanced method where we actually have fans and people who buy the products help develop them too. Have the Year of Monsters. Talk about that. Year of Monsters, where we came up with monstrous ancestries. A
Mhm.
lot of ancestries, but no one's playing a doppelganger, playing a mimic, or intelligent weapon, or demons. And we was like, okay, let's do it. And we're doing really outside the box stuff, like the doppelganger. I don't know, I haven't even told you this, Mark, but people like freaking loving the doppelganger. I've been getting a lot of positive comments because people can't believe it works. People are like, I
Mm.
can't believe you can be a doppelganger, actually play a doppelganger, do doppelganger things, and it's balanced. That's what I hear everyone's.
I think they're
Um,
used to it where it just kind of gives up on trying to be balanced. And it's just like you could turn it to anybody, nobody can figure it out, even at level 1, and that's just
right,
what you are. Or they're used to it where it just doesn't give you much, so you don't feel like you're able to change into a lot of shapes.
Mhm.
right. But even that, we have design streams where we're having people give us notes and feedback because we're going to come out with a book at the end of the year with all the answers, and we're going to modify them again. So like they go through internal testing and internal review. And the guys we have are that for that are very, very good. And then I go through it as I kind of go through it at the end. I actually am better at finding mistakes or clarifying issues than really the balance. I trust Mark to do. I'm more
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
is this supposed to do this? And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Add this sentence. Um, and then based on what people find as they play it, we adjust it. And that's kind of our products. Our products are things they're I would call high level products that a publisher like Paizo would put out. Not
Mhm.
even a Kobold Press, like someone who can really do classes. Now, there's a lot of people who put out classes, um, but they don't do it the Paizo way, and we do
Mhm.
it the very nuanced, very balanced, and very
I would
Well,
say
especially
it's
for
like,
second edition. Yeah, it's
yeah,
important for the math to be really tight on that. Mark?
yes,
yeah, I would say it's like if someone was putting out something in the Paizo way, but that could be on a topic that Paizo would might not be able to do. Like Paizo couldn't put out a book that was a 136-page book with one dragon ancestry in that book. They just
Mhm.
couldn't. They are a company that like we have me, Steven, and a lot of freelancers. Paizo has like almost 100 people and a lot of freelancers. They if they put out a book that was only about one dragon and that was one of their big hardcover releases, it doesn't appeal to a broad enough base of like everybody. They need every book to be something more or less that everyone might want. But
Mhm.
we can put out things that a smaller subset of people will really, really want, and we can do hard, difficult design challenges that would normally require you to have someone who really, really understood the system because, well, I wrote a decent chunk of the system too. So that's sort of,
Mhm.
I think that's our business model.
yeah. We're doing stuff that's very hard.
Mhm.
It's just it's funny because lots of people when we put out the Dragon book, a lot of people tried to do this, and the number one thing people said before it came out is like, "How? How are you gonna do it? How? That
Mhm.
was the number one question. And then everyone read it, they're like, "Oh," one of those, like, "It was so simple, why didn't I think of that?" Because didn't, and even,
Mhm.
like, the Eldamon book was even a step above, I'd say, Dragons and then some. Everyone's tried to do a Pokemon type product or monster hunting or
Mhm.
type product, and they're very popular. There's about 1,000,000 video games, and actually, there's a whole bunch of new ones that just came out, like, on Kickstarter. It's actually really growing. Um, this last year, actually, for whatever reason, actually, I know people who played Pokemon have now grown up, and they're of the age that
Right.
they can program it, so they're making
Mhm.
their own. They're like, I'm gonna make Pokemon, but better." So I'm seeing a lot of these monster capture video games.
Mhm.
No one's been able to figure out how to get into the RPG space
Mhm.
because it is incredibly hard. It is ridiculously impossibly hard. So that's why Mark is full time. There's probably very small handful of people,
Mhm.
I think.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And Mark, can you talk a little bit about what you do for Roll for Combat? You've kind of talked about it a little bit here, and how that differs from the kind of stuff that you did for Paizo before, and maybe how it's similar.
So, as the director of game design at Roll for Combat, I work very closely with Steven in setting all of the books and products that we're going to put out that are game design products for Roll for Combat. Putting together the outlines, getting any freelancers, or writing it myself in a lot of cases as well. Working on the design and then copy fitting when something is over or under, handling editing questions, basically everything that I would have done at Paizo, except more because I'm at a higher level where I'm
Right.
like designing the products rather than like going to a meeting with 12 other people where we kind of get our ideas together and then present those at another meeting with 7 other people. And so it's kind of like working at Paizo with less red tape, I guess.
Right.
There
Right.
are fewer meetings and there's fewer logistics of getting things coordinated between 6 different teams to make sure everyone's on board, everyone knows where the file is, everybody is doing their step, and all of that management stuff that I
Mhm.
was doing at Paizo. I don't have to do as much of that. I still have to do it with freelancers, but at Paizo that existed as well.
Right.
So basically, I can spend more time both sort of doing long term planning. Maybe another thing is more of marketing or going on shows, even going online, talking to fans. I have
Mhm.
that is part of my work at Roll for Combat, as specifically determined by Steven when I talked to him about it, and it counts towards what I'm doing. Whereas at Paizo, it does not count if you engage with fans. Anything that you see when a Paizo staff member engaged with fans, it did not count as like part of their work. That was like on their own additional
Oh,
time.
that's kind
That
of
was on
foolish
top
for
on top
branding
of their 40
purposes.
hours.
Yeah.
Unless it was a scheduled interview that got
Yeah.
okay from marketing, those would
Yeah.
count for Paizo. But if like someone's on Reddit or something, so
Right.
basically it's more comprehensive. I can do some of the things I enjoy, like sharing things with fans, like writing complex systems, but trying to make them simple and easy to use, and sort of have more creative control because Steven and I work together about what we're gonna do. And that's mostly the difference. But other than that, it's really quite similar. I
Mhm.
use the same techniques that I would have used before. In many cases,
Right.
the same, like even the same programs, like InCopy to do the copy fitting. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
the same Steven used the same printer to print out the books. So it's very
Interesting. Yeah.
familiar.
So
Mm.
that's one of the questions I was gonna ask is with the less red tape, do you have a faster from concept to final product process than Paizo?
Oh yes.
Or if using the same printer, then that's a bottleneck,
Oh, the
obviously.
printer's a bottleneck
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. But like, let me tell you, and I will not say anything about what it is because of the fact that we have not revealed this yet. But like last week, Steven came to me and he's like, Mark, I think we should do this thing. It was another thing we had discussed last year to maybe do,
Mhm.
but that we had sort of set it aside. And that was on like late Monday or maybe early Tuesday. And then I was able to say, yes, that's great. Well, I liked it before, I like it now. Get an outline, get people for the outline, and just get through all of it by the end of the week. And
Wow.
you cannot,
Wow.
I cannot overstate how much longer than that it would have taken at, I mean, this isn't that any problem with Paizo at any big company, right? I'm sure it
Right.
takes even longer at Wizards of the Coast.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at Paizo, that would have taken that process would have taken months to happen. Not all of it would have been me working straight through the months like I did that week, but it would have taken at least like 4 weeks of my time to do it, between like concepting, going back and forth with people, making multiple outlines, getting approvals, meeting with people about the approvals for the outlines, different phases of things involving freelancers, and it happened in a week. Now, in
Mhm.
terms of start to finish, there's some differences because in some of these cases, like Year of Monsters is a product that is over 200 pages, all of which I will have probably written. And
Mhm.
so at Paizo, I would not have written all 200 pages of something. It would have been all freelanced out, except for
Right.
a few pages that I took. It's usually for me about twice as fast to go through somebody else's pages than to write it
Mhm.
myself. For some people, it's even more of a speed advantage to go through someone else's pages than writing it themselves. So, in that sense, the writing portion does take longer in the parts that I would write myself. But I would still say that start to finish, it's going to be much faster because there's less red tape and there's
Right.
less bottleneck and there's also less lead time at Paizo. By the time like you see a product, like it's so far after when people were really starting to work on it. Like for example, Treasure Vault, at the time when this airs for everybody, I think it'll be out for
Right. End of
every,
this month. Yeah.
yeah, so and we're airing in 3 weeks, right? So
Mhm.
in 3 weeks from the day now when we're taping it, so it'll be out like roughly then. So
Yeah.
Treasure Vault is a book that I literally wrote some of it while I was still working at Paizo, right?
Mhm.
And we just said at the beginning of this interview that that was something that happened that I switched over a year ago. So
Mhm.
there's a long process in books. It is somewhat shorter for, well, for combat, but it varies depending on book to book.
Mhm. Well, cool. So last month, there's a really big hado here from Wizards of the Coast as they tried to deauthorize the Open Gaming License version 1.0a. And it seemed to me from the outside that Roll for Combat was kind of at the forefront of this movement here
Yeah, that
to
was
kind of
pretty
get
random.
that. Yeah, but it seemed like you were like some of the most vocal people out there early on. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit. For me, I'm curious to clarify the timeline for how things happened, like
Sure.
when what you're allowed to say. I don't know
No,
what
yeah,
might
we
be
can
protected by
say it.
things.
The fact that we're
Okay.
willing to say things is entirely the reason that we wound up in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Because what happened was, Steven had been making really accurate predictions of what
Hmm.
Wizards and Hasbro were going to do just based on his business knowledge for a while. And he decided, okay, I've heard rumors that like maybe they're going to release the updated OGL on this one particular day, which happened to be the day before the Gizmodo article came out. We didn't know that. Let's just put out a stream. So we did. They didn't release the OGL that day, but what did happen is that we started talking about what we thought might be in it, predictions based on Steven's knowledge of business,
Right.
and just during that stream, I received a leak of some things from the OGL. And we were not the first to have been given a leak. At the very
Right.
least, we know that Indestructo Boy, another streamer, has had it for multiple weeks, but was kind of afraid to quote anything directly from it, but was just like, "Listen, everyone, it's bad. I have it. You should know." And he was right. But we were not afraid to quote it, so I just directly gave three quotes. I didn't have the whole file. I had selected quotes from my leak, and I gave
Mhm.
those three quotes on air at Roll for Combat. So rules lawyer was watching our show and took those quotes and made his own show that was like, "Hey, roll for comment. Just got these three quotes from the
Yeah.
OGL," and that video of his exploded because it was
Mhm.
short and just had those quotes in it. So then after that, most people on the throughout the rest of that day were more or less saying that they thought it was a hoax, or
Mm.
like we made it up, or
It was
even
January 4th at exactly, I think it was 3:39 PM East
Eastern.
is when
Yes,
we got the quote. We
there
got
you
the
go.
leak, and that's when we released it to everyone. And then, immediately I started calling my lawyers.
Yeah,
That's the
Yeah.
first thing I
Yeah.
did,
yeah.
and they started looking at it, and they,
So the
uh
consensus was that that people thought that it was a hoax, and
Mhm.
even like moderators on some news sites were like really saying some nasty stuff about it. So at the very least, though, like Owen Casey Stevens came on and like, look, I know both of these two people. There's no reason that they would put out information that they didn't believe in. There's no benefit. Like it's definite.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a hoax. But he admitted he didn't know, other than that he trusted us. And so
Right. Right.
a few people were thinking maybe it's not a hoax. The next day in the morning, Linda Codega's article drops on
Right.
Gizmodo. It has all of our quotes more or less were overlapping with quotes that were in the Gizmodo article, because well, the leak that gave it to me knew some of the sections that were very contentious and gave me those quotes. And so
Right.
of course a good well written journalistic article would overlap. So people are, wait a minute, this is the same thing they were saying yesterday, and Gizmodo is reporting it, and this seems a lot more legit. There were still some people who were skeptical, but it immediately went to being more assumed that no, this is real. This is probably real. Especially Wizards were quiet. They weren't saying this is a hoax. They were just kind of not
Right.
saying anything.
Right.
And
They were pretty
so
quiet for a couple weeks there, and then
yeah.
things really exploded. Then they had to respond.
So that's sort of how we got in the middle of it, was just
Mhm.
because of the people who had received leaks, we were one of the first groups that put out actual quotes of that. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
then we just kept having more content where we talked to people like Ryan Dancy, who was
Right.
the mastermind behind one of the masterminds behind the original OGL. We had Steven's lawyer, who he had called, come on the show to give his thoughts about the legality that people listened to in case that they were worried about what was going to happen to them. I guess we were streaming right when the Orc license was first
Yep.
announced, so
Mhm.
we read it out loud about the blog, and just we had like 8,000 people or something like that that were watching
Mhm.
us right then.
Mhm.
So we just happened to be at the center of this, just kind of by chance, or I would say by not completely by chance, but because I know a lot of people in a lot of circles, and
Mhm.
that's why I received a tip with the leak on that on the OGL 1.1 license.
So when you heard about that, especially you, Stephen, from a
Mhm.
business perspective, what was your initial thought from that original leak that came out and kind of what they were talking about with the licensing and everything? What were you thinking about that and what gears were going at that time?
Well, you could watch the video, you could see exactly what I was thinking, 'cause it's all recorded live,
Yeah.
but, at first I couldn't believe it, and then I was thinking about it, and then I was like, "This will never." Well, it didn't even matter what they were trying to do, because they can do anything they want with
Mhm.
6th edition D&D and with OGL, whatever they wanna call it, 2.0, 3.
Mhm.
What they were trying to do was deauthorize 1.0a, and I
Right.
knew that was impossible. I knew it couldn't be done. I knew it was gonna be ridiculously hard if they went down that road of trying to
Right.
do it. And then, you know, I wasn't, to be honest, that concerned, which is,
Mhm.
I know it's a lot of people, it was very scary. It was a very scary time. And I think that's another reason we were in the front of it, is that, like you listed the companies I work with. Like, I work with very big companies on a daily basis. I
Mhm.
work with Fortune 500 companies. I work with like presidents and CEOs of these companies. Um, I, have to do contracts with them on a constant basis. So to me, this was just another company. It was like, it's Hasbro. I'm not that scared of them. Really,
Right.
some of the lawyers I have work are their lawyers. Used to be their, so I know their lawyers. It's like I know some of these people, so I wasn't that concerned. Just because of my day job. And then after I spoke to my lawyer, then the very next day, on the 5th, we had him on and he went through it. He's like, they can't do any of this.
Mhm,
He's
mhm,
like, good luck. He was very adamant about, he has like 35 years of contract law experience.
mhm,
And by the way, he said it's funny because he didn't say he was an expert. Legally, he's not allowed to say, no lawyer's allowed to ever say they're an expert at anything. It's actually not allowed. But
mhm,
he's been doing contract law for 35 years. So I'd say an. And he went through it. And first of all, the OGL is 900 words. It's a very simple contract. He's used to the contracts that are thousands of pages. He's like,
mhm,
this is it. Like just on my lunch break. This is nothing. So he looked at it. And he's like, they can't do it. And he was giving, he does a much better job explaining all the legality and the history of the system. He's like, you can't do it. And they can try and they can do anything they want. And that's very common. Back in the video game wars, back in the early 2000s, there
mhm,
was a lot of laws being passed to limit free speech through video games, and they all were very scary, and they all were overturned when they
mhm,
finally went to court because they were illegal. And I saw that, and I've lived through that more than once. So I'm like, they're going to probably try to do it. They're going to scare people, and then it's going to go to court, and it'll get overturned. And
mhm.
because it was so simple, they'd probably get a bench ruling, and that would be it. It
Right.
would be over. So I was not worried at all. And that's I think we're in the middle of it because we were talking to a lot of the other content creators, and I'm not dissing anyone else, but a lot of content creators are, they don't have a professional, or they might not all have, some do, some don't, but not all of
Right.
them have professional backgrounds or worked same fields I have,
Mhm,
or work with Fortune 500 companies, and so I was really not scared to go toe to toe with them. I wasn't scared. Um, Talk to my lawyers nearly every day. They kept telling me there's nothing they can do, so I was like, okay, so we'll just go up and against them. And then I thought about it and I kind of figured it out last night with our interview with Professor Dungeon Master.
mhm,
What they didn't realize is, and it keeps coming up, is that the people at Hasbro and WotC don't understand their customers. They really
mhm,
don't. And I feel that strongly because why people went nuts is because I think D&D and role playing games are they're not you call this in you call this in advertising a lifestyle brand.
mhm.
This isn't a lifestyle brand. I think this is actually more like a religion. I think
Ah,
it's much closer
okay.
to religion than like
Yeah.
because this defies people's existence
Mhm,
and
mhm,
people if you're taking away their religion and their existence, they will fight to the death. And
mhm,
people got very, very angry very quickly, and everyone united in the blink of an eye.
mhm,
And I was like, wow, guess I see how that works. I've never experienced that before. And
mhm,
even I was like furious, and
mhm,
people still now they will never, ever, never go back, ever to 5e or what, no matter what
mhm.
they say do, because they were so angry.
And that
And
seems good for the rest of the industry,
it's
from what I'm hearing.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yes.
they did exactly the opposite. They were trying to clamp down and make as few competitors as possible, and instead they destroyed a large part of their market
Mm.
share, their market trust, and have made thousands of competitors in the blink of a week. They were able
Yeah,
to do it.
I don't think they were trying to get rid of the low-level competition. I actually think going
Oh yeah,
forward, with their movie and everything else, they were worried about Disney and
no, they
other
were not.
big companies coming in.
Nah, they said that. It's total crap. Because
Oh.
you don't have it where if you're making $50,000, you have to. I mean, when you were making
Yeah, that's true.
50,000,
The
you had to
verbiage in
register.
that.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
register everything.
Even if
I
you're
mean,
not making 50,000,
yeah,
right? Even
Yeah.
if
yeah,
you're just grossing 50,000
right,
and a
yeah,
lot of that went to the printer and the books
yeah,
and all the things like
Yeah.
that, and you're like a pretty niche, you're doing it
yeah,
after your day job. you are putting in a lot of money to it, and by the time you're done, you've spent tons of hours and you've made a profit of maybe 5 to 10,000
Right.
as like a tiny side hustle. You still have to send all of it to them, and they could cancel you at any time.
Yeah,
Right. Well,
yeah,
with intellectual property, if they don't deal with everybody who potentially could go against them with it, then that actually sets some precedents for everyone. So, legally, I could see why there might have been some reason to have that, but you're right. I think that that verbiage does not match up with the other. Now, Mark mentioned, you were on the air when you heard about the open role-playing game creative license getting started. Were you involved with that at all from the beginning, or was that something that was just strictly driven by a couple players, maybe Paizo talking to somebody else?
uh,
And we were in the initial blog as one of the companies that supported it.
I'll tell you exactly what happened. So, I was talking with Eric Mona a lot, and he and I were talking a bit about it. And that's actually why we stayed on air because Eric was texting me and say, "Oh, we're
Mhm,
releasing." I knew exactly when it was getting released. So
mhm.
that's another reason we got in, like as it got released before the
Yeah.
website crashed because he said it's up, so we went.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean,
we weren't.
unfortunately, we may have helped crash the website since
Oh,
8,000
we
people
definitely
were
helped.
watching and
Oh, we
probably.
definitely helped crash the website,
Yeah.
but we weren't in it as much as we wanted to be because Eric didn't want it to look like there was collusion on
Right.
us because there
Right.
wasn't. So, and I don't even know if you know this, Mark, but Eric and I were talking. So he was trying to keep us distant because there wasn't. There was no collusion. He did his
Mhm,
thing. He was doing his thing. We were doing our thing. We talk a lot, but it was more just as friends talking. Um, so we were involved in as much as probably anyone else in the beginning, and that we supported it.
mhm,
But now what's going to happen is, and everyone's in the same boat, is they're building the orc right now, and then they'll be putting it out and asking people to comment,
mhm,
and
mhm,
we'll be part of that first.
mhm.
We'll be stress testing it to make sure it works for us or anything else that we can find in it that looks like a loophole or an issue.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right. Right.
basically, you can understand. I understand Paizo and Eric's footing. It's like he was just very careful. He's like, "Look, obviously we have similar interests, but you're like a partner of ours, and you're really leading this charge." And it
Mhm.
was like there was a lot of potential conflicts of interest, so we had to be just careful.
Right.
And he
Right.
kept me a little bit in the dark, like I knew a little bit, but he didn't want to tell me everything because plausible deniability.
Right.
But now it's all out in the open.
Mhm, mhm. Now, since Wizard is backtracked on any changes to, 1.0a, are you still gonna be producing under that license, or
Yeah.
are you going to strictly move on to Orc?
Well, at one we haven't seen Orc. I can't
Yeah.
comment on Orc. That's the
Okay.
first. The
Alright.
first thing in law is you can't comment on things until you see the document. So I have no
Right.
idea. I imagine it's gonna be really good, but until I see it, I can't do anything. For our Pathfinder products, we're still using OGL, but that will probably move over to Orc. I think it's
Right.
for our 5e stuff, we're still using OGL. I don't want to use Creative Commons because Creative Commons is a little too open, and
Mhm.
we still want protected property. Like
Right.
there's
Right.
still can still do protected identity in
Mhm.
OGL. And as I said, there's 20. You can watch all of our videos on this. I won't rehash it. There's 23 years precedence of history with the OGL. They've gone back. People are saying that they have actually been very careful in interviews, saying they haven't said they wouldn't ever try to revoke OGL 1.0. So yes, they could always try again. It will be so nearly impossible for them to hold that up in court, especially everything that's happened.
Mhm.
And they've already lost so many people. Like, how much worse can their press get if they try to do this again? So I think
Mhm.
it's pretty safe to
Plus, it's in
publish
the
with
Creative
OG.
Commons.
Yeah, plus it's
Apparently, they
Creative
didn't
Commons.
pick. They picked one that wasn't share alike, so you might be able to even use it without putting any of your stuff in the Creative Commons.
Okay, yeah, I haven't looked at
Mhm.
it that close, but I spoke to my lawyers and even Ryan. Remember, he
Yeah,
mentioned it.
Ryan had mentioned later after he talked to
Yeah.
us that it was not a share alike one that they picked, which means that you might be able to use it and be completely closed.
Yeah.
But that's we like the idea of contributing the game mechanic stuff to sort of a community, and but being able to keep our world lore and other product identity that's really defines sort of the Battle Zoo lore and IP to be separate than that.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. So, if somebody wanted to get into, say freelancing or even publishing right now, in light of everything that's going on, would you recommend that they wait for Orc to come out? Or given what you just said, it's just fine to keep using the OGL as it is and
It depends on what they want to do.
Yeah.
mhm,
And also depends what platform. Like
Yes.
if you're gonna use Pathfinder Infinite or Games Guild, they have their own license, so you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about any of this. They have their
mhm,
own. If you're gonna do your own stuff, use OGL. I mean, look, if they're not gonna do anything, okay? I mean, I've been right about everything except the one thing I was wrong about was I didn't think they'd ever revoke. I never think they would give up as quickly as they did, which was stunning. Like,
mhm, mhm,
still can't believe they did that. Kind of. Now I'm starting to see. Now I see what they're trying to do. I can understand because they had a lot of things in the pipeline that were starting to back up, and they needed
right,
to get it out, so they had to get this behind them very quickly.
mhm, mhm,
I will be very curious. I think in April, I'm curious. I think things might pick up depending on how the movie does. I don't think this saga is over yet. Quite
right,
part two in April or the summer when I think they're
yes,
gonna. I think there's gonna be more to this than a pause right now. OGL 1.0 is very strong. Um, There's other licenses out there. I don't never use them, but for other game systems. So
mhm,
it's not your only system. And quite frankly, if you're not using the SRD, you
mhm,
don't need OGL 1.0. In fact,
right,
Pathfinder, and Eric said this publicly, they don't need it. They
right,
don't even need to use it. You don't need anything.
There
mhm,
were
So
I feel like there's some small changes that we probably would have made if we knew that we definitely weren't going to be using the OGL, but it's not really a lot, right? But to get back to your actual question, John, I would say it depends on what game you're going to write for. If you're writing for
right,
Pathfinder Second Edition, then your only option right now, more or less, is to use the 1.0A and possibly the Pathfinder compatibility license, assuming that you're
mhm,
not running for Infinite, like Steven said, which is its own separate
right,
license. And that's because Pathfinder is share alike on that license, and to even use it at all, you need that. If you're writing
right,
for 5e, um, check with your lawyer about what actually is true with the Creative Commons that they decide to use,
yeah,
but I've heard that it's not even share alike, so you can just use it and not do anything. That
mm,
may or may not be true. So check to make sure whether you need to put your stuff in Creative Commons or not. It sounds like you don't even have to, and you might not
mhm,
have to do anything. If
mhm,
you're
mhm,
doing another game, like Steven said, they all have their own license. So for none of those games, if you're getting started literally right now, like you were saying, for none of those games would you currently use Orc. But when
mhm,
Orc comes
mhm,
out, you can decide if Orc is a good fit for you, if one of the systems that you want to write for, or more than one of them, are in Orc. And I have faith that I think Orc is going to be a good choice later on, but for now, you don't need it right now.
right, right. Well, cool. Well, thanks for talking about that. I know you've been discussing the whole thing quite a bit, and I just wanted to get a little perspective from you all, not just on what was happening, but what happened behind the scenes. And so that's awesome to get that from y'all. So
well, it's been all 2 weeks since.
yeah, oh, okay. So what's next for Roll for Combat? What's coming out that you all can actually talk about here? What can we expect here?
So let's see. By the time this airs, it'll be like March 2nd or something like that.
Hmm.
And so we will be either close to having released, or we probably will be like the week after that we put out Battle Zoo Ancestry's Thenos, which are the
Hmm.
Medusa kin that first appeared in Bastiri 3 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that are sort of
Hmm.
an ancestry, and that's being added on to the Year of Monsters. Also in March, there's a lot of goodies coming out. We're gonna have the Strange and Unusual Battle Zoo Bestiary. We're hoping PDF for Pathfinder Second Edition out sometime in March, and we
Hmm.
are aiming, hopefully, to also have out a playtest for the Elemental Avatar class with 2 of the 13 elements by the very end of March. It'll only have 2 elements because we just want to know, does the chassis work? Does the build work
Right.
with 2 elements so that we don't conflate it with just one element that has a particular ability that is changing all of the metrics. But before we write 11 other elements and just go running off doing
Right.
those, we want to make sure, does the core functionality work? And so all of that is coming out in March. And
And will that be a
continuing,
closed play test, or is that gonna be
it's
an open
like
one?
I call it restricted because it's like,
Right.
it's not a closed playtest like the Starfinder playtest where only a
Right.
few groups that like new people at Paizo were playtesting it, but it's not an open playtest like
Mhm.
a Paizo class playtest where they just put the PDF up and
Right.
everybody looks at it, but it's going to be like restricted generally to people who like have already backed and kick started the project and want to
Mhm.
get on board
Oh, yeah,
and
that
work
makes
with
sense.
Yeah.
us
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
on
yeah.
the
Yeah,
playtest. So it's a little in
if you
between. It can be a little more manageable because we are 2 people and really only one of which is like really focused on looking at the playtest results, and
Mhm.
Paizo would have had an entire design team. And so if one person gets sidetracked onto the playtest, other people are doing other design.
Yeah, if you backed it on Kickstarter, you'll automatically be invited. And if you pre-order it on battlezoo.com, if you pre-order the Eldamon, you can order the Foundry module or the PDF or the hardcover book, will be invited. We again, you also want to limit it to people who are really interested in this,
Right. Right.
because those are the people who will probably give us the most focused and the strongest feedback. They're the most invested. Um, so you give it to completely open. Also, we have to filter through a lot of a lot of feedback that
Right. Right.
be all over the place, and and Mark's going to probably do most of that. So we just want to get very clean, focused feedback. And quite frankly, we've been doing this with our other products, and it works very well.
It
Mhm.
was
We have,
fantastic with our other
yeah,
products. I'm
yeah,
hoping that we don't get like an order of magnitude more people this time than last time because that might be too much. But if we can have something like we did for, say, the Dragon book, that was I felt like that restricted playtest was one of the best sweet spots compared to closed playtests, which I've done, and they don't always have enough people. I've done the Paizo open playtest, which I've done at Paizo, and they sometimes have so many that it takes a whole lot of effort to get the information out, even though you get some amazing stuff from those. So I
Mhm.
really liked the restricted playtest last time. I'm hoping that it's going to be awesome here too.
All right, one last question. Are we gonna see another RPG superstar coming out?
Well, I think so. We already announced last year that the next one is going to be called Elemental Storm. We announced it at PaizoCon
Okay.
last year. But we didn't put it out at all last year because there were just a lot of
Mhm.
things going on. So
Mhm.
I would assume that we might have it for this year since we didn't have it for the last year, but
Alright.
there's no
Cool.
official announcement of that yet.
Alright. Alright. Just hoping. Just hoping. So,
yeah.
right.
Considering what's going on, and I feel bad we missed a year because everyone's like, "Where was 2023?"
Mhm.
I'm sorry, where's 2022? And I was like, yeah, there's a lot going on, and it actually takes about 4 to 6 months for it to go from beginning to end, and then you
Right.
got to
Right.
work on it. It's actually a very long process because I
Yeah.
want to give people time. So it was like if I didn't really launch it by the summer, it probably wasn't. It was going to go into this year, which is actually what
Right.
happened to the other ones.
Mhm.
I
Um,
think
and
every
then it
other
got
year
late.
or every year and a
Yeah, it
half
got
is just the
very
natural
late.
pace.
Yeah, it just got very late, and then it was the holidays, and I'm just like, yeah, if I launch, it's just very hard to launch in the fall. It's a little easier to launch in the
Right.
beginning or middle. So uh, I'll put it this way: we announced there would be another one,
Yep.
so it's just a question of when it comes out. It'll
Okay.
probably be pretty soon.
Pretty soon. I like it.
I
I
think
like it.
every other year works for this. It would be nice from the participants' point of view to have more of them, but I think from the point of view of like how many bestiaries we make,
Yeah.
Right.
and like Steven said, the length of the process from open call for the entire contest to letting people write it to judging it to bringing it
Mhm.
in to us doing the pass and the artists and the layout and all of those things. Doing that every year is very tight timing
Right.
wise, whereas doing it every other year is actually kind of loose. It gives you us some room to not have to worry about it too much to make sure it's going to be the best product it can be. So
There's gonna be a lot of competition if we do it again, I think, 'cause,
Yeah.
get all the 5E people coming in. They,
Mhm.
wanna learn the systems.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. Be good. It'll be good. Well, Stephen, it was great getting the chance to chat with you and get to know you. And Mark, good to see you again. Thank you both for joining us on the podcast today.
thanks for
Yeah.
having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.